And President Trump's back at it again. This guy's too much. He's out there back on his 51st state.
So
we're not going to America. We're not spending our money there. It's Canada first, baby.
On social media, Canadians are loud and proud about boycotting trips to the U.S.
So there's been a lot of talk from Canadians saying, I don't want to go to the U.S.
Hey, welcome back to my channel. Today's story begins with a single line that sounded almost like a joke, yet carried the weight of a geopolitical earthquake. Donald Trump, standing before his audience, declared that Canada could be a serious candidate to become America's 51st state. At first, it seemed like one of those offhand remarks designed to grab headlines and fade away. But this time it didn't. Because when the laughter died down, Washington unveiled a wave of tariffs so severe they felt less like routine trade policy and more like a direct strike at Canada's economic foundations. The measures were staggering: 100% duties on pharmaceuticals, 25% on heavy trucks, and up to 50% on lumber and furniture. For industries anchoring thousands of jobs and billions in cross-border commerce, this was no passing remark. It was a seismic jolt, and here's where the story twists. What began as a line meant to shock may actually mark the opening move in something much larger, a shift that rattles a framework of North American trade and security. Was it just theater to project strength? Or was this the first step in a confrontation that could redraw the balance between Canada and the United States? Before we go further, hit that like button if you're finding this eye-opening. It really helps us beat the algorithm. The ripple didn't stop at the border. If Washington believed tariffs would corner Canada into compliance, the first pushback came not from politicians but from ordinary consumers. Rather than absorbing the price hikes on American imports, Canadians reached for a different weapon: their wallets. Surveys suggest that more than 7 out of 10 Canadians plan to buy fewer U.S. products in 2025. This isn't just about economic caution, it's a deliberate turn away. The effects are already visible. Sales of American liquor in Canada collapsed by more than 60% in the last quarter. Grocery giants are rewriting their playbooks. Sobeys has slashed the share of U.S. goods it carries, while Loblaw has signed contract with more than 100 new Canadian suppliers. Out of this shift, a movement has taken root. Buy Canadian has evolved from a patriotic slogan into a form of quiet resistance, fueling a surge in domestic sales and giving local producers new opportunities to grow. What at first looked like a simple adjustment in shopping habits is now beginning to resemble a collective act of defiance, though if you've made it this far, you probably care. Consider subscribing to stay updated. That quiet resistance soon spilled into another arena, one few in Washington seemed to anticipate. After consumers began turning away from U.S. goods, the next form of pushback came through travel. For decades, Canadian tourists have been the lifeblood of American border towns and resort states, spending billions each year on everything from hotels to gas stations. But just months after Trump's remark, those once busy crossings are turning into eerily quiet corridors. By August, car traffic from Canada into the U.S. had fallen by 35%, while air travel was down a quarter over the same period. Earlier in June, Canadian arrivals by air had dropped 22%, and road crossings shrank by a third. This isn't an isolated dip, it's a trend, and its implications are heavy. Analysts estimate that even a 10% decline in Canadian visitors cost the U.S. economy more than $2 billion in lost spending. With current numbers far surpassing that threshold, projections now warn the U.S. could forfeit as much as $12.5 billion in international tourism revenue by the end of 2025. What once looked like a friendly flow of leisure travel has now become another front line in an escalating economic standoff. And as tourism fades, the shockwaves inevitably ripple into the job market. What starts as canceled vacations or fewer shopping trips soon filters into payrolls as industries from hospitality to manufacturing begin to feel the squeeze. Hotels and restaurants in U.S. border states are reporting fewer bookings, while retailers accustomed to Canadian customers are cutting hours and laying off staff. The connection is direct. Less spending means fewer jobs, and on the export side, the damage is just as severe. Sectors that once relied on Canadian demand now face a shrinking market, with ripple effects spreading from factories to small businesses. What began with a single line from Trump has now triggered something far larger, a collision of policy, pride, and people's pocketbooks that U.S. shipments of spirits to Canada and Mexico have slumped sharply, and trade groups are warning that as many as 31,000 American jobs tied to this sector could soon be at risk. In Quebec, officials are raising alarms as well, pointing to tens of thousands of positions in lumber, furniture, and heavy trucks that may vanish if tariffs and boycotts persist. Corporations are already reacting. Brown-Forman, the maker of Jack Daniels, has reported shrinking profits and even delayed its quarterly earnings release, a move that highlights the uncertainty gripping multinational firms that at the grassroots level, American farmers and small businesses are feeling the immediate effects. Many are receiving cancellation notices from Canadian buyers, watching carefully built supply chains unravel order by order. The outcome is no longer theoretical. Employment, once considered the steady anchor of cross-border commerce, is now emerging as one of its most fragile points. What began as a straightforward economic dispute has morphed into something deeper, a clash of national identity. For many Canadians, Trump's words and the tariffs that followed were not just about policy, but challenges to their independence. The response has quickly taken on a cultural dimension. A new phrase, elbows up, has emerged as a rallying cry. Printed on T-shirts and carried into demonstrations, it captures a spirit of defiance that resonates across the country. Rallies invoking the phrase have drawn crowds of more than 1,000 people, while the sentiment has seeped into daily life. Resistance is no longer confined to boardrooms or trade statistics. It has become visible in symbols, slogans, and everyday choices. Beyond the streets, this movement is leaving measurable imprints on the economy itself. Domestic products are flying off the shelves, with some stores reporting sales increases of up to 80%. Nearly half of small businesses say they are benefiting directly from the surge in consumer loyalty. Boycotting American goods is increasingly framed less as an economic calculation and more as an act of national pride. Media coverage, replaying Trump's remark over and over, reinforces a sense that Canada's identity is being tested and that buying Canadian is a form of resistance. This moment is being reframed as an opportunity. For many, it is a chance to reinforce economic self-reliance, to shift purchasing and production away from the U.S. and toward domestic suppliers. From supermarkets to manufacturing plants, the foundation of an alternative future is being laid, one that could endure long after the immediate trade conflict fades. The deeper the standoff drags on, the clearer it becomes that the fallout is not confined to a few sectors or temporary backlash. Instead, what is emerging is a fracture in the very idea of North America as a unified economic bloc. For decades, the region functioned under the assumption of seamless integration. Steel from Ontario, auto part from Michigan, lumber from Quebec, pharmaceuticals from New Jersey, all flowing across borders with minimal friction. That architecture is now under strain. Tariffs are cutting directly into industries that support entire provinces. Steel and aluminum in Ontario, autos in Quebec, lumber in British Columbia, and pharmaceuticals in Manitoba. Canada's political response underscores the seriousness of the shift. Prime Minister Mark Carney has traveled to Mexico to coordinate strategies aimed at reducing dependence on U.S. trade flows. It is not just a short-term hedge, but a signal of long-term diversification. Canadian firms in spirits, lumber, and pharmaceuticals are actively seeking deals in Europe and Asia, markets that once seemed secondary, but now appear essential. Globally, the implications are significant. Economists warn that the drag from this trade war could shave as much as half percentage point off global GDP growth. The losses ripple far beyond North America, touching supply chains in Europe, Asia, and Latin America. What began as a bilateral dispute between Washington and Ottawa is increasingly reconfiguring the way goods, jobs, and investment move around the world. Instead of one integrated bloc moving in step, North America is beginning to resemble three countries charting diverging economic paths. And here lies a paradox. What began with a single statement and a handful of tariff orders now risks becoming a case study in self-inflicted damage. By trying to project toughness, Washington may have unleashed forces that weaken its own position. Billions of dollars in Canadian tourism spending are evaporating, leaving U.S. border states with half-empty hotels and shuttered storefronts. American producers are watching their goods rejected across the northern border, while Canadians turn inward and outward toward Mexico, the European Union, and Asia for alternatives. The result for Americans is a triple blow: Higher prices at home, lost jobs across multiple industries, and the uncomfortable realization that their closest trading partner is no longer a guaranteed customer.